Good day everyone, how you doing? Good, I hope. So, little known fact about me. I like comic books. I know, right? Big reveal there. And I also like fighting games. So it goes without saying that Marvel vs. Capcom is one of my favorite fighting game franchises ever. Marvel vs. Capcom being a celebration of Marvel Comics and the various Capcom video game franchises, it honestly felt like it was made just for me. In fact, actual little known fact about me. The first version of Marvel vs. Capcom 3 was my first introduction to Marvel characters like Taskmaster, Dormammu, Super Skrull, and even She-Hulk, who if you've been watching me for a while, you probably know that these characters are now some of my all-time favorites. So Marvel vs. Capcom is fundamentally one of the biggest influences on my perception of Marvel Comics. So, with all that being said, I'd like to say, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite was mostly a massive disappointment. I say mostly because there are a few parts I liked, but it was overall bad. The Marvel cast felt very MCU-ified, the lack of X-Men, who are literally the reason this franchise even exists, and Fantastic Four characters just hurt. There was horrible visuals and presentation, etc. I could go on and on about MVCI's problems, but I don't want to as that's not why I'm here. Anyway, with Capcom's recent return to the fighting game world, thanks to the god-tier Street Fighter 6, I love that game! I've been thinking about a possible Marvel vs. Capcom 4. And after the success of the Sonic Frontiers boss video I made, seriously, huge thanks to everyone who supported that video. It meant the world to me. I wanted to try my hand at making a hypothetical Marvel vs. Capcom 4. Now, before we begin, do I realistically think we could get a Marvel vs. Capcom 4? Probably not. As for my understanding, Marvel isn't the easiest company to work with, but if it were to happen, and if Capcom for whatever reason decided to recruit me to help, this is how I would make Marvel vs. Capcom 4. Now, before we begin proper, I'd like to give a special thanks to the Metal Blade 5, as while I was writing the early drafts of this video, I stumbled upon his Marvel vs. Capcom 4 concept video, and it was really good. I won't spoil his video, but my original draft had a lot in common with his video, so to avoid treading the same ground, I ended up changing a few things about my original concept. I did carry a few things over from that draft though, so you'll notice a few similarities. Anyway, let's begin. So, before we jump into the super fun parts of this concept, let me get the overall theme of the game out of the way first. The title would be Marvel vs. Capcom 4 Battle World. The title is relevant to the hypothetical story mode I've cooked up, but we'll get to that a bit later. But for those who have no idea what Battle World is, let me explain quick. In Marvel Comics, the Battle World is a patchwork planet created by the Beyonder, who is practically a funky space god during the 1984 Secret Wars event. And while I love the Beyonder, we'll be looking at the other major version of Battle World from Secret Wars 2015 for inspiration. It's a patchwork world consisting of the different universes in the Marvel multiverse that was forged together by Dr. Doom after the multiverse exploded. That's a very summed up version of events, you should go read it. This information will be a lot more important later in the video, but I wanted to get that out of the way before we begin. So, with that being said, let's jump into the most important part of the MVC, the roster. So, starting off, let's talk about the returning fighters. Ideally, I'd like this game to be the Smash Ultimate of Marvel vs. Capcom, with as many returning fighters as possible. However, getting every character from X-Men vs. Street Fighter through Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite doesn't seem entirely possible. But, if it were possible, that's absolutely what I'd go with. But for a more realistic roster, these are the ones I'd go with. First of all, because the X-Men were absent from Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, I wanted to go back to the series' roots, and have a good chunk of the roster be both Street Fighter characters and X-Men characters. So using that as a starting roster, this is the roster I would come up with. I even ran this by my Discord server, link in the description, and they agreed with me. So, thanks Euro's Hideout. Oh, and you probably noticed Ken and War Machine down there. While I think they could work as their own individual characters, I like the idea of Echo Fighters like in Smash, so they're gonna be our starting Echoes. And now onto the most interesting part of the video, the newcomers. I'm not gonna lie, I may have gone a bit overboard with the newcomers. I kept having cool ideas for characters and I wasn't gonna, able to stop myself. So in order to keep this video from going too long, for most of these newcomers I'll only be giving a brief overview of how I'd make the character and their general playstyle. There is a few exceptions to this rule, but even then they won't be going super in depth. First up is Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch. She's become a very popular character in recent years, and she would fit into Marvel vs. Capcom very easily. Especially due to her mutant heritage, I think anyway. I can't remember. Is she still a mutant? I don't know. Anyway, she'd be very easy to pick up, hard to master type character. I could see her moveset being very similar to Doctor Strange, but with a lot less variety and a lot more raw power. Kinda like a fusion between Ermac from Mortal Kombat and Menet from Street Fighter V. Next, we've got Miss Marvel. Assuming they don't go with Kamal's power set from the MCU, Kamal could be a really interesting fighter. She'd be another easy to play character, playing like a far more simplified version of Super Skrull, and Dalsim with a bit more of an emphasis on embiggening. Next up is my boy Spider-Man, specifically Miles Morales. Some of you are probably worried about him playing too similarly to Peter, but Miles can absolutely have a unique enough playstyle. He'd share the basic web ball and web swing moves, but the rest would be fairly different. I could see him utilizing his Venom strikes to be a more direct version of Peter, using less web shooter based moves while playing more aggressive. However, he should still be very mobile, like Peter. Alright, so you know how earlier I mentioned that some of these characters will be a bit more in depth than others? Yeah, so this is one of those. Moon Knight. I love Moon Knight. He's been a favorite of mine for a long time, so I'm going to show a bit of bias here. Moon Knight would be a very aggressive character. He'd be a semi-mobile brawler, rewarding bold plays while pressuring the enemy fighter. He could have his crescent darts as a projectile attack, his bow staff as a mid-range attack, but the best weapon in his arsenal would be his fists. As Taskmaster put it, never met a punch you wouldn't rather take than dodge, have you? Moon Knight's fighting style is inherently self-destructive, and I'd like his moveset to reflect that. I'm envisioning most of his brawling moves would have high super armor, and he'd have some semi-counterattacks would let him attack immediately after taking damage. Is it kinda self-destructive and possibly either underpowered or overpowered? Yeah. I don't have a defense here, I'm extremely biased towards Moon Knight. Next up is the Herald of Galactus himself, the Silver Surfer. I truly think that Silver Surfer is a heavily underutilized character in media outside of comics, and I'd love to see him here. I'm not 100% sure about this, but he was supposedly supposed to be in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, but they cut him due to him looking too much like Iceman and having issues with the board, I believe. So it'd be pretty great if they added him into Marvel vs. Capcom 4. I can see him using his board for a majority of attacks, with the rest of them being power cosmic related. It'd also be sick if his hyper combo level 3 featured Galactus, I'm just saying that'd be pretty sick. Alright, so the next one is almost 1000% never going to actually happen, but I'm the one in control of this list, so I'm going to do what I want. So, Marvel vs. Capcom 3 had relatively obscure characters for its time, Jim McGrath, Taskmaster, etc. So I'm gonna one-up this by including someone who is owned by Marvel and is obscure. Death's Head. Now, you probably have no idea who Death's Head is, so I'll quickly explain. Death's Head is a bounty hunter, a freelance peacekeeping agent from the Marvel Transformers comics. Why are you looking at me like that? Long story short, he's a robotic alien bounty hunter who has faced off against Unicron, Hot Rod, and the Doctor from Doctor Who. Hey, Editor Euro here. I literally just found this out and I'm recording this really quick. Turns out Death's Head was in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 in Strider's Ending. Isn't that cool? I didn't even know that until... whoa! Anyway, I just wanted to point that out quick. Back to the video. Point is, he's been around. He's cool. His moveset would probably be zoner adjacent, but I'd imagine he could swap out his arm attachments for different style attacks. Basically like Deadshot from Injustice 2. His level 3 could even be Death's Head 2 showing up to demolish the enemy fighter. Death's Head is a wild character, and I think he'd fit perfectly into the world of Marvel vs. Capcom. So Capcom, add him, yes? See, that was a reference to the way he speaks, because he talks like... Next up is the God of Mischief, Loki. So, fun fact, while I was researching things for this video, I found out he was considered for Marvel vs. Capcom 3, but the God of Mischief's personality and abilities weren't considered viable for a fighting game. Challenge accepted, Capcom. Loki would be a highly technical character, prioritizing illusions and trickery above all. Using his illusions, he'd be able to do fake-out moves similar to DJ from Street Fighter. Add some ice-based attacks in there, and BAM! Viable for a fighting game. Take that, Capcom! Or Marvel. Next up is Kraven the Hunter. I think Kraven has the potential to be a really unique fighter for the Marvel roster. I can see him playing as a defensive to highly aggressive fighter, using spears and tranquilizers to slow his opponent from a distance, and then going in for the kill once the time is right. Honestly, I just like the idea of Kraven going against all these godly opponents and somehow winning. It's just great. I don't have anything else for this part. I just like Kraven, okay? You'll probably notice a common ground for the last 3 Marvel characters. But next up is Black Cat. I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't have a solid idea how she'd play aside from being a high mobility, low defense-esque grappler. Hey, wait. She'd be a high mobility, low defense grappler. Jokes aside, I really just like Black Cat as a character, and I think she'd be a great anti-hero villain addition to Marvel vs. Capcom. Just a thought, I don't know how viable it'd actually be in-game, but maybe have her have an ability to steal meter from the enemy. Not all balanced, but if you have a better idea how to incorporate her thief side to her moveset, please let me know in the comments. Alright, for the last Marvel newcomer is a character who's risen in popularity the last few months. This one's also my favorite one that I've made. The Spot. I think the Spot has so much potential for an interesting but unconventional moveset in a fighting game. I kinda envisioned Faust meets Janemba and Hit from Dragon Ball FighterZ. He would be another highly technical character, using portals to control the battle and to apply pressure. I can see him using his holes.
Can you stop talking about your holes? You're making everyone uncomfortable over here.
As various attacks. Maybe a long-range command grab, a teleport to quickly get behind the enemy, dealing melee attacks from a distance, a limited counter using the holes on his body, that sort of thing. However, due to this having a ton of potential to be overpowered, I'd balance it by making the Spot a glass cannon. He needs to keep the enemy away from his body or else it could be easily game over. Kinda like a reference to his first appearance where he was wrecking Spider-Man and then he got hit and he just dipped. Alright, now on to the Capcom newcomers. A lot of these are self-explanatory, with most of them already having a general idea of how they play, so I'll be keeping it relatively brief with these. First up is my boy Luke from Street Fighter 6. He'd practically play exactly how he does in Street Fighter 6, and that's perfect. There's not a lot to go over here, but I'm certain he would be in Marvel vs. Capcom 4 if it was real, so I'm adding him to the list. Next up is JP, also from Street Fighter 6. Same as before, he'd play exactly how he does in that game. I'm mainly adding him because he'd be a cool new villain rep. That's all I got for this one, I'm not gonna lie. Next up, we've got Roadblock from Exoprimal. So I've got to come clean here, I have no idea how this one would play, as I haven't played the game. But it's a big robot with a shield and he looks cool, so yeah. Tinky high defensive robot, maybe have a few dino attacks thrown in there too. Yeah, good enough. Next is Proto Man. He plays similarly to Mega Man from Marvel vs. Capcom 2, but with a higher defense. Maybe throw in a couple different Robot Master abilities, you know, spice it up a little. Lady from Devil May Cry. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, Lady is one of my favorite Devil May Cry characters, so yeah. Expect a little bit of bias here. She'd be a decently mobile zoner with some melee capabilities. I'm imagining her combos from Devil May Cry 4 just kind of copy-pasted into a fighting game format. On top of that, if you added her in, we could get the entire Devil May Cry trio all in one team, so that'd be very cool. Just saying, that'd be sick. And we've got another DMC character, Nero. Nero would play similarly to the way Dante plays, where he has high combo potential, just like the game he's from. I won't go too in-depth here, but I'd imagine his gimmicks would be using Exceed Damn Damager's Red Queen, Charge Shot with Red Rose, and the different devil arms he could use as specials. I even have a few ideas for his supers. For his level 3, he could share the Devil Trigger super that Dante and Virgil already have, but he'd gain some extra command grabs due to his wing arm things. And for his level 2, Nico could assist with her crashing the van into the opponents. He could even be a good rival for Death's Head thanks to their, common hand swapping thing they got going on. Next up is Azura from Azura's Wrath. Honestly, I'm surprised he wasn't a newcomer in Infinite. He'd be perfect for these games. Like look at him. See what I mean? I'd imagine he'd be a tanky brawler with a rage gimmick of some kind. He could even use rage to increase the amount of arms he has, dealing more damage. That sort of thing. Alright, we've got another character I'm surprised isn't already in. Leon Kennedy from Resident Evil 4. He'd play similarly to Chris Redfield, but swap out the weapons with the different weapons from Resident Evil 4. I'd imagine he'd also have a sick knife counter now thanks to, Resident Evil 4 Remake. And honestly, I kinda just want to see that. but against, like, I don't know, Iron Man. Imagine that, that'd be sick. Alright, our second and the last one is Lord Raptor. Same as Luke and JP, he'd basically be a copy and paste of his moveset from the Darkstalkers series. Each new Marvel vs. Capcom game has a new Darkstalkers rep, and I love Lord Raptor, so he's my pick. And last up is the Arisen from Dragon's Dogma. This one was a request from the King Deadman Apollo, so I ended up working with him for this one. He did most of the work. The Arisen's moveset would be a combination of the multiple classes, Strider, Fighter, and Mage. He could use Meter to use different special moves from each of the unique subclasses. Fighter would be the default stance, with Strider's daggers and bows, along with Mage's magic being used for the special attacks. Their level 1 super would be Ricochet Arrow, their level 2 Arc of Deliverance, and their level 3 would be High Maelstrom. Alright, fun fact about this part. This isn't in the script or anything. I forgot to actually write this part of the script while recording, and I DM'd Deadman Apollo to quickly help me make a moveset for this, so huge shout out to him for doing this last second. Just huge shout out, thank you. And with that, we've gone through the roster. Now on to stages. There are a total of 12 stages, with 6 being Battle World stages, which are 2 iconic locations fused. This will make more sense once we talk about story mode, with the other 6 being normal traditional stages. I've even made some concept art to show a rough idea of what it would look like, and they are as follows. New Metro City, basically Metro City from Street Fighter 6, but with a Daily Bugle. Ruins of Exgard, the aftermath of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Valconda, the stage from Marvel vs. Capcom, literally just the same thing, copy-paste, sure, whatever. Fort Varia, Fortuna City from Devil May Cry 4 meets Doctor Doom. What's the worst that can happen? And then Corpse of a God. Alright, so you know Jetta's Fetus of God stage? That one? Yeah, replace the fetus with a dead celestial and boom! And then we got Kwaikoa, which is Krakoa from X-Men meets Devil May Cry 5's Quailof Tree. And then for the traditional stages, they would be X-Mansion from X-Men, Deserted Chateau from Darkstalkers, the Multiverse, you know, Marvel What If, Willamette Mall from Dead Rising, and then Rise of the Devourer, the Galactus stage from Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and Nashal from Street Fighter 6. Alright, now that we've got all of that out of the way, let's jump into what I would do for the story/single-player mode. This is a mode that I'm calling Battle World Tour. I really think Capcom nailed World Tour in Street Fighter 6, and I think that'd be a perfect format for a Marvel vs. Capcom story mode. The main difference is you wouldn't be playing as an OC, you'd be playing as your recruited characters. Imagine Ultimate Alliance's team format, you know, that sort of thing. But more on that later. The general plot is that after the events of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, the universe fused into a pseudo-battle world, with different iconic locations for both Marvel and Capcom now being fused together. See, those Battle World stages make a bit more sense now, huh? You must travel and explore these iconic fused locations, and recruit different fighters to fight a new threat, who is seeking to control Battle World. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, I couldn't decide who this threat was gonna be. The major options were God Emperor Doom and the Maker, because Marvel vs. Capcom has a tendency to use Marvel villains, so I kinda was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But I ended up choosing Kang due to his current presence in the MCU, but it really could be any of these. But it's basically World of Light from Smash meets World Tour. The different fused locations would also be controlled by different boss characters. Beating these characters will either grant bonus rewards or progress the story, depending on the boss. Examples are as follows. Metro City is ruled by Hagar, Corpse of a God is ruled by Jetta Doma, Fort Varia is ruled by Doctor Doom, Valconda is ruled by Black Panther, Kwaikoa is ruled by Magneto and the Brotherhood of Mutants. Ruins of Exgard is in a battle for control between Ultron and Sigma. Now, in regards to Ultron and Sigma, I think it'd be funny if they had a little post-Marvel vs. Capcom divorce questline, where they're actively fighting against each other for control of Exgard, with eventually both of them being defeated/recruited, and Exgard then being co-ruled by Thor and Dr. Light, due to, you know, Asgard Mega Man. And that's the story mode. Now, to wrap up this concept, I've got one more shorter section as a metaphorical bow, the DLC. I won't lie, originally it was going to go way more in depth here, but as I'm writing this video is already going longer than I thought it would be, so I'll save all the in-depth stuff for another time. Anyway, the DLC would release in themed packs, each containing one Marvel character, one Capcom character, and a stage. I've come up with about 5 of these. The first DLC is Gods themed, with it being called Divine Punishment. The characters included are Gore the God Butcher and Chakravartin the Creator, with the stage being Chakravartin's arena from the end of Asura's Wrath. I'm not gonna lie, I think the title for this one is God Tier. The second DLC pack would be street level themed, with the name being Blind Vengeance. I'm gonna give you a few seconds to guess who the characters are for this pack. Are you ready? Good. It's Daredevil and Juri Han. The stage would be either a Hell's Kitchen rooftop or Fogwell's gym. I couldn't decide which was better, so I put both of them on here for the sake of discussion. The third pack is called Symbiosis, and that's right, it's horror themed. The characters would be Carnage and Jack Baker from Resident Evil 7, with the stage being the Baker's home from Resident Evil 7 as well. Honestly, I almost put Jack in the base roster, but I thought it'd be fun to pair him up with Carnage here, so I ended up saving it for this. The fourth pack is future themed and is called Destined Future, with its fighters being Spider-Man 2099 and Vile from Mega Man X. Much like Miles, I think Miguel could easily be a distinct enough character from the other Spiders, and Vile is cool, I mean, he's just so cool. And then the fifth pack is an interesting one, as it's based on past Marvel vs. Capcom games. Its fighters are Apocalypse from Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and Ultron Sigma from Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, with the stage being Onslaught's boss stage from the original Marvel vs. Capcom. This is the sole exception to the one Marvel, one Capcom rule, as Ultron Sigma is technically more Ultron than Sigma, but whatever. And that's it. That's how I'd make Marvel vs. Capcom 4 if I was put in charge, which I'm not. I originally wanted to try and get this out for around EVO, but I have no idea if, I can actually scrap this part. It is not, EVO was like 3 weeks ago, so I'm not gonna lie, I missed that mark entirely. Anyway, how'd I do? Let me know what you'd change about this, or if you got any similar ideas or anything like that. Oh, and let me know if you'd like to see more concept like this. I had fun making this. It took a lot longer than the other one did, so I hope it's good. I hope you all like it. Anyway, I hope you have a great rest of your day or night, and yeah, farewell.